The alien crowd was silent. Every eye in the village stared at the human standing before the female chief, in her hands. She held a massive, ancient mace, its weight legendary. Even for the strongest of aliens, she stepped forward, offering it to him with a small, challenging smile. Everyone expected him to fail. "No human has ever held this," the chief whispered. "It's impossible for you." The human looked at the mace, then at the crowd. His hand tightened around the handle. Slowly, he lifted it. A gasp ran through the spectators. The human didn't drop it, not even once. The chief's eyes widened. "By tradition, this changes everything." Whispers erupted. What did she mean? Why would a human holding a heavy mace change centuries of rules? The villagers leaned in, curious and tense, and from the shadows, something moved, watching, waiting. In this moment, the story of strength, courage, and a tradition no one expected was about to begin. The alien village was alive with quiet, whispers, and soft footsteps. Humans were rare on this planet, and this one had already caught everyone's attention. He stood at the edge of the ceremonial ground, his eyes scanning the crowd. Everyone stared, curious, skeptical, and a little amused. Today was the day of the tradition, and all eyes were on him. The female chief walked toward him, her steps graceful and confident. In her hands, she carried an ancient, heavy mace. Its metal glimmered in the sunlight, and the carvings along its handle told stories of generations. No human had ever held it before. It was too heavy, too sacred, and too important for a stranger like him. The crowd whispered among themselves, expecting him to fail. She stopped in front of him and held out the mace. Her eyes were sharp, watching, testing him. "No one thought you could do this," she said softly. "But if you succeed, it will change everything." The human reached out, hesitating for a moment. His fingers brushed the cold metal. The crowd leaned forward, holding their breath. Everyone expected him to drop it immediately. The whispers grew louder. Some aliens shook their heads, some smiled with disbelief. He tightened his grip, feeling the weight in his hands. The mace was heavy, heavier than he had imagined. His muscles strained, but he did not let go. Slowly, carefully, he lifted it. The villagers gasped. The human did not stumble. He did not falter. He held it steady, and in that moment, the impossible became real. The female chief's eyes widened. A smile touched her lips, though she did not speak. She had not expected this. By tradition, holding the mace meant something far greater than strength. It was a symbol of respect, trust, and courage. And now, a human had done what no one thought possible. Whispers turned into murmurs. A human, holding the mace, some said, "This changes everything," others whispered. Eyes turned to him with curiosity and a touch of admiration. He felt the weight not only in his hands, but also in his heart. He knew this was the beginning of something new. The chief stepped closer. "By holding this mace," she said, her voice calm but full of meaning, "you accept a role in our tradition. You will face challenges, but you will also discover who we truly are, and perhaps who you are too." The human nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and nervousness. He did not fully understand the tradition yet, but he could feel its importance. The crowd was watching, waiting for what would come next. Some smiled, some looked uncertain, but all eyes remained fixed on him. Suddenly, the wind shifted. Leaves rustled in the nearby trees. Shadows moved at the edge of the village. Someone was watching from a distance. The human did not see it, but the feeling of being observed added to the tension. Whatever was coming, he knew it would not be simple. The female chief guided him toward the center of the ceremonial ground. Other aliens stepped aside, forming a circle around them. She lifted her hand, signaling the start of the first challenge. The human's heart raced, but he kept his grip firm on the mace. He was ready, or at least as ready as he could be. "Your first task," the chief said, "is not only to hold the mace, but to carry it across the sacred path. Every step will test your balance, your focus, and your patience. One mistake, and you must start again." The human took a deep breath. He placed one foot in front of the other. The path was long, lined with stones and gentle slopes. The mace felt heavier with each step, but he did not let go. The crowd remained silent, each spectator holding their breath as he moved forward. Some aliens whispered quietly to one another, guessing whether he would make it. Halfway through, a slight wobble threatened to unbalance him. The human paused, steadying himself, feeling the weight of the mace in a way he had never imagined. The chief watched closely, her eyes sharp and patient. "Do not rush," she said softly. "Focus and you will succeed." The human nodded and continued. Step by step, he advanced. The mace did not slip. The path did not end him. With each careful movement, he felt a strange connection to the village, to its people, and to the tradition that had lasted for generations. This was more than a test of strength. It was a test of heart, of determination, and of understanding. Finally, he reached the end of the path. The crowd erupted in quiet applause and murmurs of surprise. The human lowered the mace gently to the ground, completing the task. The female chief stepped forward, her face glowing with approval. "You have done more than we imagined," she said. "By holding the mace, you have shown courage and respect. You are now part of our tradition." The human felt a mix of relief and pride. He had done what no one thought possible, but deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The village, the tradition, and the challenges ahead were far greater than this one moment. And somewhere in the shadows, unseen eyes watched, waiting for what would come next. The sun began to set over the village, casting golden light across the ceremonial ground. The human looked at the mace one last time, feeling the weight not only in his hands, but in his life. He had started something new, something unexpected, and the story of courage, respect, and tradition had only just begun. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the village in shades of orange and purple. Lanterns flickered along the paths, casting long, shifting shadows. The human stood at the center of the ceremonial ground, still holding the mace in his hands, feeling the strange mix of pride and uncertainty. The villagers watched him closely, their expressions unreadable. Some eyes held admiration, some curiosity, and some just a hint of doubt. The female chief approached once more, her steps silent on the stone floor. "Tonight is not the end," she said softly, her voice carrying a quiet authority. "It is only the beginning. By holding the mace, you have proven your strength. But there is more to our tradition than strength alone." The human nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He glanced around at the village. The streets were narrow and winding, lined with houses that glowed with warm light. The trees swayed gently in the evening breeze, and somewhere in the distance, the soft hum of the river could be heard. It was peaceful, almost peaceful, and the calm only made him more alert. "Your next challenge," the chief continued, "is to understand us, our history, and our ways. It is not enough to hold the mace. You must walk among us, learn, and prove that you can respect our customs. Only then will the true meaning of the tradition be revealed to you." The human followed her through the village. Children peeked from behind doorways, some shy, some bold enough to step forward and touch the hem of his cloak. The villagers nodded in respect, though a few whispered quietly to one another. He sensed their curiosity and the way they measured him against their own people. Every step he took seemed to draw attention, and he realized that being different made him stand out in a way he had never experienced before. As he walked, the chief explained stories of the past. She spoke of generations of warriors and scholars, of decisions that shaped the village, and of the rituals that kept their society balanced. The human listened intently, realizing that the tradition he had joined was far deeper than a simple display of strength. It was a way of life, a careful weaving of courage, wisdom, and respect. They arrived at the edge of the village, where a series of platforms had been built among the trees. The chief gestured toward them. "Tonight, you will walk the path of understanding. Each platform holds a lesson. You must move carefully, observe closely, and remember everything. The path tests not your muscles, but your mind, your patience, and your awareness." The human looked up at the first platform. It was narrow, suspended above the ground, and glimmered faintly in the lantern light. He stepped forward slowly, feeling the sway beneath his feet. The villagers gathered below, silent, their eyes following each careful movement. The first platform held a small puzzle carved into its surface. Symbols he did not recognize covered the stone, but as he touched them, a pattern began to emerge. He studied it, moving his fingers with care until the puzzle clicked softly. A small mechanism shifted, and a door at the far end of the platform opened. A quiet murmur ran through the crowd. The human had passed the first test, but the chief's expression remained calm. "There are more to come," she said. "Do not grow confident too quickly. The lessons are designed to challenge your understanding, not your strength alone." He moved to the next platform. It was higher, with a gentle incline and steps that required careful placement. The challenge was subtle. He had to balance while observing patterns in the carvings. On the steps, each mistake would not cause harm, but it would force him to start again. He concentrated, his mind alert, his senses sharpened. He could feel the eyes of the villagers on him, the quiet weight of their expectations. Halfway across, he noticed a small figure moving at the edge of the forest. At first, he thought it was a child or one of the villagers, but as he focused, the figure slipped behind the trees, watching him. A shiver ran through him, not of fear, but of awareness. Someone or something was observing the human, curious about this unexpected participant in the tradition. He took a steadying breath and moved forward. Each platform tested him differently. Some required memory, some attention, some careful observation. He stumbled a few times, not out of weakness, but from the complexity of the challenges. Yet with each step, he grew more confident. He began to understand the rhythm of the village, the flow of their customs, and the importance of patience and focus. Finally, he reached the last platform. It was the largest and most intricate. Carvings of past leaders and the history of the village covered every surface. The chief stood nearby, her gaze steady. The human studied the carvings, piecing together the lessons of the night. When he completed the final task, the platform glowed softly, signaling success. The crowd erupted in quiet cheers and whispers of admiration. The human descended carefully, holding the mace, and felt a warm sense of belonging. He had not only carried the weight of the mace, but the weight of understanding, respect, and tradition. The chief stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You have done well," she said. "Tonight, you have begun to bridge the gap between our worlds. But remember, this is only the start. Many lessons remain, and the path ahead will challenge you in ways you cannot yet imagine." As he looked at the village, glowing under the moonlight, the human felt a mixture of pride, curiosity, and anticipation. He had proven himself, but the journey was far from over. Shadows shifted among the trees, and somewhere in the distance, faint lights moved. Someone or something was watching, waiting for the next step in the story to unfold. The night settled around him, quiet but full of promise, and the tradition, now shared with a human for the first time, had begun in earnest, ready to weave new stories of courage, respect, and discovery. The following morning, the village was bathed in a soft, golden light. Mist hovered over the trees, and the river reflected streaks of pink and silver. The human walked slowly through the paths, still carrying the weight of the ceremonial mace. It had become more than just an object in his hands. It felt like a symbol of responsibility, a connection to the village and its traditions. The female chief met him near the edge of the village, where the forest began to grow thick and mysterious. "Today," she said, her voice calm yet serious, "you will learn why the mace is so important. There are stories hidden beneath its weight, stories of those who came before us. You must see and understand them to honor our tradition." The human nodded. He felt a strange excitement mixed with uncertainty. The chief led him down a narrow path between tall trees, the sunlight barely reaching the ground. The villagers watched from a distance, their eyes curious, yet respectful. It was rare for a human to walk so freely among their sacred areas. They arrived at a clearing where an ancient stone circle stood. Moss and vines covered the rocks, and strange symbols were etched into their surfaces. "Each stone tells a story," the chief explained. "You must learn to read them. Only then will you understand what it truly means to hold the mace." The human stepped forward and placed the mace carefully on the ground. He crouched to examine the carvings. Some symbols were simple shapes, others more complex, almost like pictures from a distant past. He traced them with his fingers, trying to understand their meaning. Slowly, patterns began to emerge, a tale of courage, patience, and wisdom. He realized that each leader in the village had faced challenges, not of battle, but of decision, observation, and respect. As he studied, he felt movement at the edge of the clearing. A soft rustling among the trees caught his attention. He turned, but saw nothing, just shadows dancing in the morning light. The feeling of being observed returned, subtle but persistent. It was as if the forest itself was aware of his presence, testing him silently. The chief spoke again. "These stories are not easy to read. Many have come here and failed to understand. They saw the symbols, but they missed the meaning behind them. You must look deeper, beyond what is visible." The human took a deep breath and focused. He remembered the lessons from the previous night, the importance of patience, of careful observation, and of connection. He traced the symbols more slowly, paying attention to the spaces between them, the curves, and the direction of the carvings. Bit by bit, he began to see the logic of the stories. A soft sound echoed in the clearing, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. The human froze, listening. It seemed as though the carvings themselves were guiding him, showing him the path that the village had followed for generations. The air felt alive, and the weight of the mace was no longer a burden, but a bridge to understanding. Hours passed. The human moved from stone to stone, piecing together the tales of past leaders. He discovered stories of courage without confrontation, of wisdom in difficult choices, and of respect for all living beings. With each revelation, he felt a growing connection to the village, to its history, and to the chief who had entrusted him with the mace. Finally, he reached a stone unlike the others. It was taller, smoother, and its carvings were more intricate. As he traced the lines, he uncovered a message hidden within the design, a lesson that went beyond strength, wisdom, or patience. It spoke of trust, of understanding the unknown, and of bridging worlds. He realized that holding the mace had been only the first step. The true challenge was to integrate himself into a tradition older than most could imagine. The chief stepped beside him. "You see it now," she said, her eyes reflecting both pride and curiosity. "You have begun to understand. But remember, the world beyond this village is watching as well. Not all will accept what you represent, and some may challenge you." Quietly, without confrontation, the human looked toward the forest and the distant hills. He sensed that her words were not a warning of danger, but a promise of discovery. The forest seemed alive, its secrets waiting for him to notice, to learn, and to respect. As the sun began its slow climb, casting long shadows across the stone circle, the human carefully lifted the mace. Its weight felt different now, not heavy, but purposeful. He understood that the stories of the past were in his hands, and that each step forward would build a bridge between him and the village, between human and alien, between tradition and change. A small movement in the corner of his eye made him glance toward the forest again. A figure, barely visible, slipped between the trees, not threatening, but curious, watching, observing, waiting. The human knew that his journey was only beginning. The mysteries of the village, the forest, and the unseen watchers would unfold in time, and he would need courage, patience, and understanding to meet them. The day continued, filled with quiet lessons, subtle observations, and the growing sense that the human was no longer just a visitor. He had become part of something larger, a story that had been waiting for him all along. And somewhere, beyond the trees, the next chapter of this journey silently awaited his steps. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. The human stood at the edge of a wide clearing in the forest, the mace resting lightly in his hands. He had grown accustomed to its weight, but now it felt more like a key than a burden. The chief was beside him, silent for a moment, letting the human take in the surroundings. "This is the final path for tonight," she said softly. "It will test more than your strength or understanding. It will test patience, focus, and the ability to adapt. Every step must be thoughtful, every choice considered. The path will show who you truly are." The human nodded, feeling the quiet intensity of the forest around him. The clearing stretched into an area of carefully placed platforms, each suspended over shallow streams, mossy rocks, and gentle slopes. The platforms were irregular in shape, some narrow, some wide, some curved. He could see subtle patterns carved into them, glowing faintly under the sunlight. The chief stepped back, letting him begin. Move carefully, observe everything. The smallest detail matters. He took a step forward, setting the mace down lightly to balance himself. The first platform was slippery, covered in dew, and he had to focus intently on each movement. He bent slightly, adjusting his stance, and placed one foot after the other. The carvings on the platform began to reveal a sequence shapes and lines forming symbols he had seen before. His memory of the previous challenges guided him midway through. The human noticed a subtle change in the light. Shadows shifted strangely, as though the trees themselves were watching him. He stopped for a moment, letting his eyes adjust, and realized that the patterns on the next platforms required not only attention, but quick thinking. Each step had to be precise, each movement deliberate. The villagers, standing quietly at the edge of the clearing, watched with anticipation. They had seen him carry the mace, walk the stone path, and learn their stories. But this was different. This challenge was designed for the mind as much as for the body. Success would earn him recognition. Failure only meant learning. But the anticipation was electric. He stepped onto the second platform. It curved slightly, requiring a careful shift of balance. As he moved, small lights flickered along the carvings, highlighting sequences he needed to follow. His mind raced, piecing together the logic of the symbols. Step by step, he advanced. Each correct movement made the lights glow more brightly, reinforcing his confidence. Halfway across, he noticed a faint figure among the trees. It was not close, but he could feel its presence silent, observing, almost curious. The human paused, wondering if it was a member of the village or something else. The chief's voice drifted to him softly. Focus on the path. Let the outside world wait. He resumed, feeling a rhythm between his steps and the glowing patterns beneath him. The final platforms were the most challenging. They curved upward, slightly, requiring him to bend and stretch in ways that tested his balance and concentration. Each symbol demanded understanding and careful attention, and the human felt the weight of the mace grounding him, giving him stability and confidence. As he neared the last platform, a soft hum began to fill the clearing. The human could not identify the source, but it seemed to come from the platforms themselves. The carvings glowed brighter, forming a pattern that looked like a map or a path. Guiding him forward, he followed it carefully, placing each foot and adjusting the mace with precision. Finally, he reached the end. The last platform widened into a circular area, its carvings depicting the history of the village and the connection of the mace to leadership, respect, and understanding. The human set the mace down gently and stepped back, taking in the full view. The glow from the carvings seemed to acknowledge his success, casting a warm light across his face. The chief stepped forward, her eyes reflecting quiet pride. "You have done what few ever have," she said. "You have moved with care, thought, and understanding. By completing this path, you show that you can adapt, observe, and respect the lessons we have given. You have proven yourself beyond what the mace alone could measure." The human felt a surge of calm confidence. He realized that each challenge, each observation, each careful step had taught him something vital, not just about the village, but about patience, awareness, and connection. The forest around him felt alive, not in a threatening way, but as if it had watched him grow and learned alongside him. Then, from the shadows of the trees, movement caught his eye. A figure stepped forward, silent, calm, and careful. The human did not recognize it fully, but something about its presence felt significant. The chief glanced in the same direction, but said nothing. The figure lingered, observing, waiting. The human felt a quiet curiosity. He did not know if this was another test or a visitor, but the feeling was unmistakable. The journey was far from over. As the sun began to set, casting long, golden beams across the clearing, the human lifted the mace once again. It felt lighter than before, more purposeful, a bridge between himself and the village, between past and future. He understood that holding the mace was only the beginning. Each step forward, each lesson learned, would build a connection stronger than anyone had anticipated. The villagers began to applaud softly, their admiration quiet but genuine. The human looked toward the forest, sensing that the next chapter awaited him just beyond the trees. A new part of the tradition was ready to unfold, and he was ready to meet it with patience, focus, and respect. The morning mist hung low over the village, soft and silvery, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The human walked through the quiet paths, the mace steady in his hands, feeling a calm strength growing inside him. He had learned patience, focus, and understanding. But today, the chief warned, would test more than his skill. It would test his ability to guide others. Today, the chief said, her voice gentle but firm, "You are not only a learner, you will take part in the protection of the village. Others will come to observe us, and your choices will matter. You must lead with wisdom, not just strength." The human nodded, understanding that this was unlike the paths and puzzles of before. This was a challenge of foresight and strategy. The villagers gathered, curious but respectful, sensing that something unusual was about to happen. From the forest's edge, faint movement suggested that other beings were approaching. They were not hostile, but their presence carried curiosity, attention, and subtle testing. The chief led him to a small hill overlooking the village. From there, he could see the surrounding lands stretching out, forests, hills, and rivers glinting in the morning light. "Watch carefully," she said. "Those who arrive may test the unity and harmony of the village. Your actions, your choices will guide us through this day." The human lifted the mace, feeling its familiar weight. It had become more than a tool. It was a symbol, a connection to the lessons he had learned and the trust the villagers had placed in him. He scanned the edges of the forest and noticed shadows moving, small groups of beings, observing, testing. They did not enter, but their attention was clear. The chief handed him a small device, a kind of communicator the village used to coordinate quietly. "You'll guide our people through their tasks," she explained. "Help them understand what to do and how to keep harmony. Observe, advise, and support. Lead without forcing. This is the ultimate lesson of today." The human took a deep breath. He began to move through the village, walking alongside villagers as they carried out tasks. Some were simple, moving supplies, tending the riverbanks, but each had subtle challenges. Stones that looked steady could shift slightly. Pathways that seemed clear had small surprises. The human's guidance helped the villagers move safely and efficiently. His calm observation and careful advice earned nods of respect. From the edges of the village, the observing beings shifted closer. The human could feel their curiosity, almost like a silent conversation across the distance. They studied how he interacted with the villagers, how he carried the mace, how he balanced care with confidence. Every small choice mattered, and the human felt the responsibility settle deeper in his chest. As the day progressed, a larger challenge appeared. A group of young villagers struggled to coordinate a task that required moving heavy supplies to the higher platforms of the village. Their efforts were uncoordinated, slowing progress. The human stepped forward, speaking calmly, pointing out patterns, suggesting small adjustments. Step by step, the villagers followed his guidance. Slowly, efficiently, they completed the task. The observing beings from the forest shifted slightly, as if acknowledging his success. The chief approached him again, her eyes reflecting quiet pride. "You see," she said, "today is not about what you can lift or how you can solve a puzzle. It is about guidance, understanding, and connection. You have proven that you can lead with patience, respect, and careful observation. That is the true meaning of holding the mace." The human looked across the village. He saw smiles, nods of respect, and small gestures of trust from the villagers. Even the younger ones looked at him differently now, with curiosity mixed with admiration. The observing beings remained at the edge of the forest, their attention unwavering but calm. The human realized that leadership was not about authority, but about awareness, patience, and quiet confidence. As evening approached, the chief led him to a high platform overlooking the valley. The sun set slowly, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The human lifted the mace, its weight now familiar and purposeful. He felt a deep sense of accomplishment and understanding. Today had shown him that connection and guidance could be more powerful than strength alone. From the far edge of the forest, a small light flickered. The human noticed it, aware that curiosity and observation were still present. The journey was not complete. There were more lessons, more mysteries, and more moments that would test his patience and wisdom. But for the first time, he felt ready to meet them not as a visitor, but as part of something larger, a bridge between worlds. The villagers gathered around him, their expressions warm and respectful. The chief nodded, her voice calm but filled with meaning. "You have begun to show the future of our tradition. Others may watch, but you have already changed the story of our village, remember. This is only the beginning." The human looked at the glowing horizon, the forest, and the village he had come to care for. He lifted the mace once more, feeling its weight as a symbol of connection, guidance, and understanding. He knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, subtle tests, and opportunities to prove his place, but he was ready. And the story of the human and the village continued to unfold, full of patience, discovery, and quiet strength. The first light of dawn spilled softly across the village, painting every rooftop, tree, and stone in gold. The human stood at the center of the ceremonial ground, the mace resting lightly in his hands. Its weight had become familiar, almost comforting. It was no longer just a tool or a symbol. It had become part of him, a connection to the village, to the people, and to a tradition that was now partly his own. The chief approached, her expression calm yet full of warmth. "Today," she said, "you will complete the journey, the final. Lessons are not only about understanding or guiding, but about trust, unity, and the bond that forms when worlds meet with respect." The human nodded, sensing the importance of the moment. Round the clearing, villagers gathered, their faces calm, curious, and expectant. Children peeked from behind pillars, and elders observed with pride. Somewhere at the edge of the forest, faint figures watched silently, still curious, still learning from the human's journey. The chief guided him toward a wide stone platform. Carvings covered its surface, stories of past leaders, symbols of patience, and images of challenges overcome. "This platform holds the lessons of generations," she explained. "You must walk it, not as a test of strength, but as a proof of understanding, patience, and connection." The human stepped forward, feeling the cool stone beneath his feet. The carvings glowed faintly, responding to his movements. Step by step, he traced the stories, letting the lessons sink in. Each symbol told of courage without confrontation, wisdom without arrogance, and leadership that came from guidance rather than command. As he moved, a gentle wind stirred, carrying whispers from the trees. The observing figures shifted, coming closer but remaining at the edge, careful not to disturb. The human felt their presence not threatening, but curious, respectful, and silently approving. He realized that the journey had grown beyond the village alone. It was now a bridge between him, the villagers, and others who watched quietly from the world beyond. Halfway across the platform, he paused. The carvings told a story of unity, showing leaders who worked together with trust and patience. He thought of the villagers he had guided the previous day, the small successes, the quiet teamwork, the shared understanding. Each step forward felt like honoring their trust and the lessons the chief had taught him. He lifted the mace slightly, letting it rest against his shoulder. Its weight no longer felt heavy. It was steady, a reminder of the bond he had formed. He walked toward the center of the platform, where the carvings formed a circle, symbolizing connection, balance, and tradition. The villagers watched in silence, their faces glowing with quiet admiration. The chief stepped forward, her hand reaching toward the human. "By walking this platform, by understanding the lessons of the past, and by guiding others with care, you have completed the journey. You are no longer a visitor, you are part of the tradition, and your actions will shape the future of this village." The human looked at the villagers, feeling a warmth and pride he had never known. Their eyes reflected trust, respect, and a sense of unity. The children smiled, inspired by his patience and focus. The elders nodded, acknowledging the care and attention he had shown. Even the observing figures at the forest's edge seemed to bow slightly in quiet approval. A soft hum began to fill the clearing. It was as if the village itself was alive, responding to the human's journey and his connection to the mace. The carvings glowed brighter, illuminating the platform with a golden light. The human lifted the mace high, and for the first time, he felt a deep, unshakable understanding of its significance, not as an object of challenge, but as a symbol of unity, trust, and shared history. The chief spoke once more, her voice carrying over the quiet clearing. Traditions are not meant to limit, but to guide. By accepting them, respecting them, and sharing them, you have changed this story. The human who held the mace has now become part of our legacy. Your journey is our journey, and ours is yours. The human lowered the mace gently and took a deep breath. He realized that the lessons he had learned, patience, observation, understanding, and guidance, were far greater than any challenge. They were a part of life itself, teaching him how to connect, how to respect, and how to inspire trust in others. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light across the village, the human looked toward the forest. The observers had retreated, but their presence remained in the quiet sense of awareness that now flowed through the village. He smiled, knowing that his journey was not just a story of carrying a heavy mace, but a story of patience, understanding, and building bridges between worlds. The villagers began to gather round him, offering small gestures of respect, bows, nods, and gentle words. Children ran to him, curious and excited, asking questions he now could answer with understanding and care. The chief smiled, proud, knowing that a tradition had been honored and renewed. The human lifted the mace one final time, holding it as a symbol of the journey, the lessons, and the bonds he had formed. It was no longer heavy, but purposeful. The tradition would continue, now with him as a part of it, and the story would be told for generations of the human who held the mace, learned the ways of the village, and created connections that bridged worlds. And as the village settled into the calm of the morning, the human knew that this was only the beginning of many stories to come, each built on trust, patience, and understanding, a legacy that would endure far beyond a single challenge.